Welcome back, Arcadians. Now, in this week's episode, we're going to be looking at a game that absolutely dominates the arcade archive floor, where it's really loud and cinematic, Attract Mode.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law.
It is, of course, RoboCop from 1988 by Data East. And what with the recent release of RoboCop onto current generation consoles, this episode makes a great opportunity to look back at not only the arcade version, but other video game appearances that Alex Murphy has made since his arcade debut. Now, when this game arrived at the museum, something I wasn't aware of, because I probably played this game on a jammer cab back in the day, was that Ocean, a British software house, had the license for distributing this game into the arcade. Ocean had already been around for a few years before RoboCop was released, and had some very early arcade ports to some of the home systems by doing deals with some of the biggest Japanese companies. The more people signed up, the easier it was for Ocean to get more licenses, and the ripple effect brought giants of their day on board like Konami, Taito and Data East. Having all these companies on board, and before even Hollywood had woken up to the new medium, getting a movie license was easy too for Ocean, and very cheap. Ocean were getting moderate success with licensed IPs with games like Highlander and Street Hawk, but they were desperately seeking a smash hit. Manager Gary Bracey became involved in the licensing process, and he had Hollywood send over all the scripts. Every license was a gamble, but having read the script to RoboCop, he thought it was going to be absolutely awesome. They got the license for pretty much everything you could think of RoboCop, but because Ocean wasn't really involved with arcade games, they sub-licensed it back to Data East, who developed the arcade game you see here in the museum. As this game came out in 1988, I already left school by then, so I was much more into my music. But I was still popping into the arcades just to see what the latest games were. But even so, I don't think I would have seen this cabinet. I'll probably more likely have played this game on a jammer cab in a British arcade, because this is an imported cabinet from America. It's a dedicated Data East that I don't think we would have had many of these over here at that time period. But it is a very striking cabinet. It's got this huge marquee that cantilevers over the monitor to give you that kind of marquee billboard that you get as you go into the cinema, which is super cool. And I think as a kid, I definitely would have wanted to go up to this game and given it a go. The PCB, which is mounted on the side of the cabinet, uses the Motorola 68000, and it's the same hardware by Data East, which was used for games like Heavy Barrel, Stadium Hero and Bad Dudes vs Dragon Ninja, which also was housed in this exact same cabinet. It comes with the original operator's manual, but it's nothing like those early Atari manuals we're used to seeing, with detailed diagrams and schematics. And that's purely because as time went on, manufacturers realised they were giving too much away to bootleggers, so manuals got thinner and less descriptive. Now, this cabinet does have side art and it's super cool. It comes straight from the movie poster, but unfortunately it is damaged and it's only located on one side. Now, this game is on loan, but if one day the museum has that opportunity to buy this game, I would definitely like to add some new side art. The bezel is extremely decorative, depicting many scenes from the movie, which I would imagine many kids back in the day would have been drooling over if they were too young to watch this violent film. The control panel, which is ambidextrous in its layout, has a single 8-way stick and 2 action buttons, jump and shoot and punch. There are no lives in this game, only a life meter, but you can get power-ups throughout the game, giving you extra power for your meter and 2 upgrades for your weapon, triple shot and super beam shot. Graphically, the arcade game looks like any other Data East side-scroller like Bad Dudes. The visuals aren't that technical achievement by 1988 standards, but I guess they do replicate the grittiness of the movie almost perfectly. There's very little in the way of platforming, though in some levels you do climb stairs or ride elevators. Some of the final areas are literally nothing but several floors of climbing, which is also where the game begins to run out of steam and grows a bit tedious. From a design standpoint, for me, this isn't exactly on the same level as Contra or Rygar, as I prefer more fluid controls. RoboCop seems to move too slowly when trying to dodge fire. But overall, it's an enjoyable game with a killer soundtrack, if not annoying when you're trying to make a video on this game. Now, because this game was such a huge success and Ocean had the license for this game, it got ported to pretty much every system. So what I'd like to do now is take you upstairs to the cave and let Neil show you some of those ports on various systems.
Hello Alex and Arcadians, thank you for popping upstairs to the cave. RoboCop, a massive smash hit of course on the arcade, but it was also huge on the home micros, especially here in the UK and especially on the ZX Spectrum, where it was the biggest selling game on the platform in 1989, and I believe it remained in the top 10 well into the early 90s. On that platform in particular, a massive seller, but also on other platforms as well. So I just want to show you some, but not all, examples of the home versions today that we've got set up here in the cave, and you can make your mind up as to how they compare to the arcade. Let's take a look. Perhaps the most fondly remembered is the ZX Spectrum version. Chunky, black and white graphics paired with really responsive controls. On the face of it, it seems like a port of the arcade, but you quickly realise it takes the mechanics of the arcade and the general level ideas, but it puts it together in its own way. There's no ED 209 at the end of level 1, for example. There's no truckload of enemies at the end of level 2. But what it does really well. It certainly deserved its place at the top of the charts, and please don't be fooled by those black and white graphics. It is an immensely playable version of the game. Another British 8-bit micro now, the Amstrad CPC. This is the version I had as a kid. It adds a dash of colour over the ZX Spectrum, but it does lose some, or in fact quite a lot, of the responsiveness of the Spectrum, making it feel a little bit clunky. Level designs are the same as the Speccy, and once you get into the groove of the different feel of it, it is too an enjoyable game. Something the 8-bit home micro versions are well remembered for, as well as the Game Boy version, is the iconic Jonathan Dunn music. It really shines on the Spectrum 1 to 8K, on the Game Boy and on the Amstrad CPC, pushing them well beyond what those sound chips should realistically be capable of. It's such an emotive tune. Have a listen.
Like the arcade intro, this music is such an earworm and quite quickly gets into your head. The menu music for the Game Boy edition was used in the popular commercial for the European electrical appliance company Ariston. This surreal advertisement is one of the earliest examples of chiptune music being used in mainstream non-gaming media.
And on. And on. And Ariston.
Onto the Commodore 64 now, and it's a different beast altogether. It does utilise the graphics hardware advantage that the system has over the Amstrad and the Spectrum, so it moves quite quickly. It's just not as enjoyable. RoboCop seems to always jump when you shoot directly up at the bad guys. You can't just shoot up, he has to bounce. Maybe he's just super excited about it, but he bounces with every shot up. And the difficulty feels like it's really ramped up on this version. And there's a good reason for that. The game was rushed out on the C64, so much so that if you manage the heroic effort of getting as far as level 7, you reach a screen of garbled graphics. No, I'm not good enough to get there, but it is apparently a game-breaking bug. But that's okay, said Ocean. Nobody will ever get that far. Let's ship it. Onto the 16-bit era now, and this is the Commodore Amiga, and it has a promising title screen.
Serve the public trust. Protect the innocent. Uphold the law.
Which gives way to a game that's far closer in its design to the arcade original, but it just doesn't look like a 16-bit Amiga game. Big borders shouldn't be necessary. Just look at something like Shadow of the Beast, whether you think that's a good game or not. It certainly didn't have borders, it had a big sprawling world and massive sprites. We know it's possible on this machine. Sprites and colours could be far closer to the arcades. Look at excellent ports on the platform such as Strider. But again, it seems to have been rushed out. It doesn't feel like an arcade port, it feels more like an Amiga game ported from an 8-bit machine, if that makes sense. We do, however, get our end-of-level bosses, and it feels more familiar to the arcade in its level design, but I think this is a rare example of a ZX Spectrum game handing an Amiga its backside. A quick look at the Atari ST now, and the kicking continues, I'm afraid. It's identical to the Amiga in all but the music and sound effects owing to its different audio chip. It's not better or worse, it just doesn't bring anything new to the robot party. And my version seems to have bugged because there should be an elevator platform here, but there isn't, which just leaves me stuck in a hole with no option but to wait for the timer to run down and meet my robot death. The final version I'll share with you from the cave today is the NES version. It's unlike any other I've played. Crash Test Dummies meets Green Beret as the gigantic RoboCop slaps people down, or at least I hope he's a giant, because if he's not, he's simply slapping kids, as well as dogs and other enemies. Levels bear zero resemblance to the arcade. It even has an exploration element, going into doors to find rooms, sometimes empty, sometimes with power-ups in them, before coming back into the main level and progressing. It's not a great game, but I was making progress until the game said, no, enough of that, I'm going to crush you against this wall. Game over, man. Game over. Hang on, that's a different film. Add to this versions of the game for the Game Boy, a very magenta-looking MS-DOS version of the game, the Apple II, the Tandy Coco. There were lots of versions out there, and Ocean were determined to milk it for every drop they could get. And who can blame them? They did it with varying degrees of success for the player, but no doubt they did it with massive success for their own bank account. So that's RoboCop, or at least some of them, on the home micros. Let's get back to the comfort and supremacy of the arcade version, please, Alex. Back to you.
Thank you, Neil. Wow, that really took me back. So much nostalgia playing the ZX Spectrum version. I think more so than the arcade game for me, because that's what I remember playing back in the day. But I think what we need to do now, because I'm absolutely useless at this game, is hand it over to our arcade guru, Mr. Tony Riccardi, to give us some hints and tips on how to play this game.
Right, just before we start the game, one thing to note is that everything is in the same place every single game. So obviously it's possible to learn the game and work out exactly where you've got to stand, duck, shoot, etc. So the first two levels are quite easy in that respect, but then it does get a lot harder. Nice and easy to start. You don't start off with your gun, you're just punching away. You get your gun in a moment. So you've only got one life on this game, represented by a bar at the bottom, which does deplete quite quickly. Extra items along the way give you extra weapons. Now this is not a very good weapon to have for the first two bosses. So there's a little cheat you can do with this guy here. I actually tend to waste my bullets by shooting at the grenades, which actually give you extra points. So quite an easy little thing to do. He's not going to shoot you apart from shooting these grenades, so I am literally just going to shoot the grenades, get some extra points, and it's also going to waste this weapon because I would just throw it away at the end. Right, we're coming up to the boss. The first boss is easy. You can almost shoot him off the screen. Just shoot at his guns and he's a goner.
Thank you for your cooperation.
So again on stage 2, a few little points where you can stand to make sure you don't get hit. So first of all, in between here, in this dark bit, you won't get hit. But we're coming to the end of the level and we can get our energy back. So end of level boss 2 is relatively easy. They don't really pose much of a threat on here. That's level 2 done. So we've now got a chance to get a bigger energy bar when we come to the bonus stage. If you miss any, you won't get the extra bonus, extra energy. Now this is random. This is random every game. Sometimes you have loads and loads of targets to shoot. Other times you get hardly any. Just got it. 3 seconds. Right, so I've got everything.
Perfect shooter.
So I get a 20,000 bonus, but I get all my energy back and my energy bar will increase.
Wow.
You only get the increase in energy bar if you get 100%. But this is the level that gets hard, and there is a hidden 10,000 and a 100,000 bonus on this level. Now I know where it is, but I actually don't know how you trigger it. I've got the 100,000 twice, and the 10,000 quite a few times, but I have absolutely no idea how you trigger it. It's here, so here somewhere there is this bonus. And I've absolutely no idea how you trigger it. Right, so I've got this weapon again, but this time it's actually quite useful for the stage 3 boss. So shoot the one on the right first of all, and you can almost take it straight out. There we go, it's gone. Now having this weapon means that you can shoot the grenades as well as shooting the targets to destroy the boss.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Now I've only lost a tiny bit of energy there, which is good for stage 4. Because stage 4 is shoot up straight away and then to the right. So up to the right, and you shouldn't get hit. So the big tip here is don't go straight up. Take the guys out above you first, take this guy out, then the girders will come down. You want to get out of the way. Then you can safely go back up again. Right, stage 4 boss. This took me a while to work out how to do. Sometimes I don't get past it. You've got to duck each time because otherwise it takes energy away. Both the ball and the crane. So it's just being patient with this one.
Done him.
And he's done. Stage 5 is pretty difficult. It took me a while to work this out. Sometimes I get through it, sometimes I don't. Right, so this guy again, you've got to duck. I'm not worried about losing a bit of energy as long as I've got, as long as I have this fire blaster. See, I've already lost quite a bit of energy. Might not get past stage 5 now. Yeah.
You didn't make it.
Didn't make it.
Oh, Tony. Not a bad run through, but you didn't finish the game.
No, no, not one of my better runs, unfortunately.
I thought you was going to finish the game.
No.
Is it as hard as Ghosts and Goblins?
No, definitely not.
No, it's a lot easier.
A lot easier. The fact that you've got everything is in exactly the same place
Yeah.
every single time. So once you know where everything is, you know exactly when to duck, when to shoot, when to jump.
Yeah.
It does get more difficult as the game goes on. As you see on stage 5, that's where it starts getting tricky. Although everything's in the same place, it's a lot harder to get around some of the obstacles, like some of the travelators that are on there. You can get stuck on them. So even though you know where everything is, you know what you got to do, you're stuck on it, that's it, you suddenly lose your energy.
So if you'd seen this back in the arcade when you're a youngster, how many 10p's of your £1 coin would you have put in this game? How do you rate it?
I would have probably put all my 10p's of the £1 in there, I reckon, to give it a go and get further. As I say, I don't think I played it in the arcade, or back in the day anyway, so very hard to say, but I think, judging on how I played the games, yeah, I'd have put £1 in.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go, guys. What a blockbuster of an arcade game, and what a legacy it left on all those different systems that Neil showed us. I guess what you really need to do now is come down and visit the Retro Collective, where you can experience all those different games in the cave, or play this amazing, striking arcade cabinet, because it really is something to behold here at the museum. Now, before we go, I just want to mention I have now set up a second YouTube channel. It is called the Arcade Archive Vault. I'll put a link in the description below, where it's going to be mainly live streaming, so hopefully you're going to get Tony Riccardi down here. My first live stream is going to be a RoboCop, me and Tony playing RoboCop, so you can see how bad I am. So head off over to there, subscribe, and you can catch us a night in the museum playing RoboCop, which is going to be super cool. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm doing this wrong with the lights.
And on. And on. And Ariston. And Ariston. And on. And on. And on. And Ariston.